Just gingerly roll it in until it stops. Now I know I'll know where that drill point is in relationship to my travel dial on the lathe there, and that way when when I get down in there, I'm not just plowing into it. Even though sometimes the taper allows the cut to start slowly and then increases the size as it gets more depth in on that drill point, and you usually have enough time to go ahead and shut down and back out. It's just kind of nice to know exactly where it's at. It's going to be in farther than our part. That drill point goes in beyond this. We're going to be parting this part off right here in the machine. So we're going to completely do all the finished work on this outside, with maybe the exception of this angle here, because I want to leave this material here for when we turn it around to have something to chuck onto and then indicate two different areas here so that we can prove that we're running completely concentric in the other direction. Alright, now I'm going to start whittling away on this bore here. And we had left off at 1 inch 750, and we're going to be going to 2 inches. We're going to be going to 2 inches and 3/16. 2 and 3/16 of an inch. Okay, the reason why I was pointing out setting up the depth and where I'm at in relationship to the end of my bore, where I want to stop my bore, is because, see this chips right here? Now, I mean, I can look in there if I really wanted to get the flashlight, and I could I would be able to see the difference of the cut in there, but it would be extremely hard for me to lean over here and really look in there. So knowing where you're at by a dial or a stop on your ways, or you don't have to, if you don't have a travel dial, you got there's other indicator mag bases that can mount right on your ways, and you can have a pointer or indicator that comes up against your carriage. And so anyway, I know where I'm at in relationship to where I want to stop there. And you can't always get in there and see what's going on in your bore, so it is kind of nice to have other references to that effect. Alright, now with this wad on here, you definitely wouldn't have been able to see the bottom of the bore. Alright, and we had just measured this bore, and it was like 2 inches 70 thousandths, and we figured just taking another 50 would put us into about 2 inches 170, and we're getting ready to measure up this bore. So we're going to bring this back a little bit here. Now I got I actually have a couple different ways that we're going to measure this. So I have an inside micrometer, and I have a set of snap gauges, and we're going to verify that measurement with this old 2 to 3 inch Starrett micrometer. This is one of my first collections here, and actually originally all my mics that I had in my collection, I used to refinish them all off in black, and then I masked off a couple areas there. That is the last inspection sticker on that. I think that that was back in 85 or so. But anyhow, one of my favorite mics to use, and still functioning fine because I still use it. And like I said, the best thing for your tools is to use them. If you let them sit for storage or you just harvest them, you know, they're not going to be as limber. Alright, let's go ahead and this is snap gauges, and they're spring loaded, 2 of them here, and there's a barrel that tensions them down here. Alright, so we're going to bring this slightly under tension, just so that we can stick it in the hole, so it's got room to play there. Alright, then you go ahead and you snap it so it's there. Snap gauge slightly cocked at an angle. Bring some tension to the thumb screw. Do not put pliers or anything else on there. It's not a clamp. All right. Now you can see how that one's sticking out there, and this one here is barely there. You want when you go ahead and you have them off center, meaning cocked in the bore, trying to get both of those equal. You can slide this back and forth, so now you have 2 equal amounts basically sticking out. It doesn't have to be a science. I mean, exact. Just, so that you know that it's actually going to be rocking on there. And then hold it in the bore and push it in one direction straight across. Those 2 will be squeezed in and will remain at the smallest point of the pass through the bore. As pressure's being pushed on these 2 points right here, they're trying to find the largest opening to pass through. Alright, so they normally will find center on their own, and that's how snap gauges actually work. Alright, let's grab our outside micrometers, and we'll try to get this in a better view here. Alright, and you put the butt end on the anvil, and you can lightly be able to move that. Do not, it's sitting there trying, keep one end stable. I got my finger underneath this end here and against there, so that that kind of stays there. And then I can get a little bit of motion here, because you're going to want to feel it, and you want to feel it when it's hitting that first contact point. Okay, I can just start to feel it right there. Right there. Okay, so we got 2 inches, 167, and if we wanted to read the tenths are over here on this micrometer. Not every micrometer has tenths, and sometimes you just got to look at it, but I'm lined up on that line right there, and it's 3/10. Alright, we'll put the snap gauge down. Remember that number, because I don't, what was that? Okay, basically 1,670 something and 3/10. Alright, now we're going to go ahead and we're going to take this inside micrometer, and of course it doesn't read in tenths. This is a real old one there, and we're going to go ahead, and this is kind of a feel thing. You put the butt end here, and you move this through the bore, and you want to find the amount of pressure that it takes. You're working at. It's a feel thing. You want that same pressure that you feel that's passing through the bore at the largest diameter or largest section in the bore, and then you're going to duplicate the feel that you have in this bore with the feel that you're going to put between the anvil and the stem of the micrometer. Okay, I got a good feel there. Alright, and it reads 1 inch, 167 and just under 68. So this reads, to me it would almost look like it would be about 9/10. Alright, so let's see what this actually reads in here now. Same thing. When you don't have another extension in here, you're trying to hold that without, I mean, there's a certain amount of tension on the barrel, at least it's supposed to be. And there's adjustments for tightening those, but I'm not going to get into micrometer or barrel adjustments at this time. And I'm just trying to get that same feel that I had in there. And what I have is 1 inch, 168. And it's pretty close to 67. You know, it's so close to, I'm reading so close to 68. But I expect to have a couple tenths difference between measuring with that and this. But within a couple tenths dimension, we're still able to pull off a bearing fit. Right? And that's what this is about. So there's two different, and whenever I get something that is close, like a bearing fit, I use both methods. Sometimes if I'm not real picky about the bore, meaning a 1/2 thousandths is good enough, I'll snap gauges almost all the time. They're just so fast, so easy to use. But if I really want to really get down to paying attention for that little bit finer detail, like a bearing fit, I'll use other measuring instruments like the inside micrometers to correspond with the snap gauges, or any other method that we're going to use to measure with. All right, so what we're looking at is we're basically about 9 thousandths away from being on the size there, maybe a little bit less than 9. Okay, we come out of the bore here. Let me blow this. Alright, we took 4. Now we're still on the, we're still working that diameter right there. We're practicing our dimensions so that when we go for that bearing dimension, we're comfortable with our method of measuring. And that's really the, that's really what you want to, you want to feel confident. You want to bring it on up. You need to know that your bit is sharp. It's taking exactly what you want. The idiosyncrasies of your lathe are, you know, all in line. Okay, we're at 2 inch, 175. And we're going to go for 2 inch, 1875. So we're going to take 6 thousandths. Alright, that time when I hit the bottom I came out just so I wasn't dragging the bit on the way back out. Some lathes you'll notice will either come away from your part or track back. You'll see a slight cut. Some of that may be tool pressure, but sometimes your carriage in the motion backwards or forwards will pitch a slight bit. All right, And this one happens to drag back slightly when I pull it back on the bore. So what I did is I just moved it out a couple thousand and then brought it back. Let's blow that out, and then we're gonna check how close we actually came. We're gonna use our inside micrometers this time here, and see what we got, and we'll verify it with our snap gauges again. And this bore doesn't have to be this close. We're just kind of running it through, okay? On this dial here, I'm reading 2 inches, 187. Oh, if anything, it might be 86 and 9.5 tenths or so, but okay, 187, and I am getting 5 tenths, but let's go ahead and drag snap gauges through here now. Wasn't quite comfortable holding my arm like that. I knew I moved that. Did you see that? Alright. 187. And I'm getting like 4 tenths. Alright, I'm pretty happy that I can come within a tenth of what we want. And what's, you know, surprising, I had, oh, by the way, I'll just make the announcement there, but the little South Bend shaper rolled on its way down to New Jersey over the weekend. But you know, my Greg that purchased the shaper swung by and he was looking at the lathe, and he said, I want to see, you know, he was talking about the crossfeed nut and stuff, and he wanted to see how much play and everything else they had. And so we was checking out the compound, and that I said, then I grabbed the compound just about like this, and okay, I'm moving it back and forth, and actually, if you look at the backlash in my dial there, I'm running about 40 thousandths, 50 thousandths on the backlash. So that's how worn out this nut is. Now this lathe is like me. I'm old and I show a little wear, but I can still get her done. And knowing your machine and how you run your machine makes it cut the way you want it to cut. And whenever they talk about idiosyncrasies or compensations and all of that, or machine wear, those are all factors that got to be in play there. Now they develop machines and stuff like that that automatically take out backlashes and all that kind of stuff. But old conventional machinery does get wear, and you got to adjust how you run the lathe. Don't think that just because you dial it in that it's going to be actually there, and you want to adjust your tooling so that you're not going to be sucking bits and a lot of different things like that. And those are the things. Go ahead, if you got a problem with something like that, give me an ask on my comments there, and I can kind of you know, at least if I've experienced it, I can give you feedback on it. Or if any of my other other viewers that enjoy throwing in a comment here or there, feel free to you know, bring in a comment on to help somebody out that doesn't quite understand it yet. All right. We're going to go ahead and we're going to double check a couple dimensions here on this part here, and then we're going to go for our bearing diameter, or start roughing it out to where we're going to be comfortable, and we're going to look up this bearing number here and find out what the diameter is. Okay, we got this bearing bore here, and we have the used bearing, and our new bearing's not in here. And I've been asked in past videos there also, by a couple of you. And it's very important. I mean, when you're learning a machine, you're learning what practices normally apply to certain things like bearing fits. And the bearing has actually got two fits. You got a housing or an OD fit, and you have a shaft or an ID fit. And there are different practices for different applications on those. Now, when I first started as an inside machinist and in the shipyards, we did an enormous amount of in-bills on electric motors. And the first thing that came about was, hey, what kind of fits do you want on these bearings? And so I went over to the electric shop, and one of the old timers there pulls out this book. All right, now I just glanced through here, and the only thing that I could find on here is reprinted 1164. So back in 1983, 1984 was about the era where I was pretty well underway, as far as maybe about three and a half years inside machinist under my belt. And I was probably still I went to night school as well. I was learning on the job, and I was going to night school, vocational. Wasn't going to any college or anything. I never been to college. Anyhow, I picked up, and this is actually ball bearing practices for the shop man. And you can see here, this is MRC ball bearings, Marlin Rockwell Corporation, Jamestown, New York. Actually put out the book there. And anyhow, in here, I'm looking under housings revolving in relation to direction of radial load. All right, I'm bringing it close here so you can look at what I'm looking at here in the book. Here's a close-up glimpse of the cover there just before I flip open here. All right. Now, this is what really gets me to, even back then, basic bearing numbers. Bearing numbers change all the time in different manufacturers and stuff like that. The bearing number that's actually coming on the bearings that we're going to replace that is 2006 is the bearing number. All right. But what we're more interested in is the dimensions. All right. And so we take this is a housing bore. Here's the bearing OD. Your highs and your max and minimum. Your max and minimum on the housing bores. And then this thing right here is ABEC 1 and ABEC 3 fits for bearing ODs. And this page is about the bearing OD. Alright, so we're coming down here in the line of dimensions here, and we're looking for 240 or so, and we're right there. Okay, the bearing numbers of that air are 1908, 107, 206, 305, R20 category as well. Okay, but those are basic bearing numbers back in the air that this book was made. Okay, now you'll find more common things in the actual dimensions that you will in the numbers or so. This is not a glossary of numbers. This is a book to tell you fits for your diameters. So anyway, housing bore, 2 inches, 440 and 3/10 to 2 inches, 439, 6/10. All right, and the bearing OD max is 2 inches, 440, 09, and we're reading about 2 inches, 440 and a half to 6/10. So we're right in there. Okay, now there's a difference between the number 1 and number 3 fit, and it's basically 1/10,000th of an inch difference. So you got 440 and 4/10, 440 and 5/10. Okay, and they call this a 13 type to 1 type fit. And that's kind of the basis on here. Let's go back to where were we? Okay, right there. All right. So anyhow, that's where I'm getting the information on this fit here. And basically, when I talk, and people asked before, and this is a general machinist rule or practice. If you want a good fit on a bearing, between 1/2 and 1/1000th per inch in diameter, and that keeps you in a safe realm up to a certain amount. Say you start getting over 6 inch in the diameters, you're going to be changing a little bit, but just general practice and rule of thumb. Now I measured up the bore and the OD of this bearing here, and they had a little bit better than 1 thou press fit on it. Alright, we're going to go ahead and we're going to start machining in the register for this bearing here, and we measured about 550 here, and we measured, this is rolled over on the edge here, but we took our depth measurements here with our dial calipers, and we got like 558 or so, but we're sure that rolled over there. So we're gonna shoot for 550 right now, because we can come in and we can adjust all of our faces as we go on this part here. It's always good to stick your scale in there especially when you're making your first cut or whatever, and just double check and make sure that everything's fine. I still have not yet changed out my travel dial, and every once in a while I have that spot in my travel dial that falters, and it does have a skip in it. So, you know, it's always just good practice to always double check what it is, especially after you invest so much time into a certain amount of your part there. You can't go back very inexpensively, that's for sure. And it doesn't matter if you're doing it for somebody else or it's your own project. You know, sometimes it's worse on your own project. All right, we're getting a little closer here. We're measuring up this bore here now with and this is where most likely I use my inside micrometers, but I'm going to show you if you don't have these. And I'm reading 2 inches 406, and let's just see what the micrometers say on that. Good, real good practice too, even though I'm just kind of I actually kind of watch my contact here, kind of play around with the feel. I'm concentrating on the feel, and I'm looking at how I'm passing it through there, that I'm straight and I'm level, and I seriously don't look at the dial until I'm ready to read what I feel. So, you know, don't lie to yourself when it comes to using your tools. You know, you can look at it and make it go where you want and wish it was good. All right, let's just you know, be true to yourself there, and your measurements will be more true. And the micrometers, just like that. If anything, I might be like 9/10, you know, 1/10 under what I actually look at on this right here. These two tools right here match pretty close. All right, now let's go ahead and I'm going to show you. Let me see, is it? Yes, the larger ones here. Okay. You notice that there's a large diameter and a small diameter in here, okay, and they spring inside, they telescope inside. There's a spring in there, there's a groove, and this little plunger right here goes in and tightens on the side, and that's how this thing works. Well, you know, we only have a certain amount of depth here, and go ahead and move this out of my way here just a little bit. Now I'm going to take and I'm going to cock it in there, but when I cock it in there, I'm going to put the small end down towards the bottom, and I'm going to hold this surface out here close to the edge here as much as possible, as close as possible, and then I tension it. Okay, so I'm good and firm. Alright, and I just kind of let that feel to where it's almost as center as you think it is, and then I just kind of put my finger here and I pull through, because I just want to try to really keep that centered and not move. I don't want this to move. There's not that much draw. It only travels from there to there. When you normally have it in a bore, you have unlimited area actually to pass that through. So when it's short, I just kind of try to make it as close as possible to start with, and then just hold it so I'm not actually slipping out of that bore, so I'm actually keeping it right next to that edge. And then bringing this past here, then you have a true diameter. And then you can go ahead and you put it in here and do the same thing. You stare at it, and you get that right feel. It's right in there. Then you look at it, and I'm actually reading 2/10 over. It looks like 2/10. It's actually 3/10 over. Alright? So, but that's how, you know, sometimes you don't have this tool. You have this tool. And I'm going to go get another tool and show you how to use that on this bore as well, and that's a pair of spring calipers.